From Washington, the McLaughlin Group, the American original. For over 3 decades, the sharpest minds, best sources, hardest talk.
Issue 1, the torment of travel.
Stand online 2 hours and 20 minutes before, and I missed the plane.
Lengthy security lines continued to plague travelers at the nation's airports this week. And while the Obama administration says it will add nearly 800 new security officers by this summer, many passengers say that's too little, too late. And so, a rising chorus of voices is asking for more efficient screening processes and potentially a move towards privatized security screeners. Others say that tragedies such as this week's crash of Egypt Air Flight MS-804 mean that government must take over airport security efforts. 56 passengers and 10 crew members on the Paris-Cairo flight lost their lives when the plane disappeared over the Mediterranean Sea. Is it time to disband the TSA and use private security firms instead? Pat Buchanan.
Not likely, John. Let me say, though, this week's Egypt Air going down in the Mediterranean just off Alexandria, Egypt, is going to make this problem of security at airports even more difficult and harder to enforce. But as for the idea of shifting to private concerns, first the insurance and the liability of any private firm that did that would be extraordinary. The price would have to be dramatically increased for what they're doing, I think. I'm not sure folks would take it on, and I'm not sure most Americans would even want that kind of risk. So I don't think you're going to get change, and if you're going to get any kind of change, you're going to get is probably you might get more folks working for TSA.
Well, you've got air travel is up considerably. Lots of people are flying. Vacation season is here. TSA should get the resources to be able to handle this. Congress doesn't want to fund anything, and that's a problem. They just like to complain. And to think that a private monopoly could take over and somehow magically make all of this better is really a fool's errand. Given what's happened in this flight over Egypt, you see TSA officials, they are in touch with their counterparts all around the world. And as the FBI Director James Comey said, the world is getting smaller. These are really like virtual security agencies now. This is no time to try to just overhaul everything and bring in a outside profit-making overseer in what is really a government-regulated entity.
Tom Rogan.
Yeah, I disagree actually with Aaron and Pat. I think there are good examples, the UK, Heathrow and Gatwick, of where private security companies can do a better job.
Let's see those names again.
Heathrow and Gatwick, which are the 2 British airports for London. And I think the problem is we go to airports across the country and you see TSA officers, some working very hard, some sitting around, and I would say it represents the failure of government, that a private security company, because it is so attuned to the need to deliver to that particular airport at that particular time, rather to a bureaucrat in Washington who has an incentive not to get rid of anyone so their roles can increase, there's that lack. It's government. Government doesn't work as well as the private sector in a lot of places. And the critical issue is that the FBI and local law enforcement, the Joint Terrorism Task Force, have control over the actual operational security in terms of counterterrorism. So it's 2 together, and I look at the lines we're seeing. I mean, it is ridiculous.
It's funny you mentioned that, Tom, because last time I was in Heathrow changing planes, I missed my plane because of a long security line, and there was never an explanation as to why they needed security, and we were in the same terminal.
Well, go to
from one plane
have you been to
another.
Dulles? Have you been to Dulles recently?
Yes.
Yeah, Dulles is a disaster. I think the United States rightly has a reputation for it.
We know what we're missing here, though, is last summer they had a surprise TSA inspection, and you may recall that 98% of the objects they were trying to sneak through got through.
Right.
And so TSA was terribly embarrassed. But what they've done is tighten up now, and what happens when they tighten up is you get long lines. We do need more facilities, like Eleanor said, and we've actually cut the funding of TSA in recent years. And we're going to have to build that back up in order to have safety and short lines.
If we have an Egypt Air incident here, I do think folks, Tom, will really not be saying, let's bring in private enterprise. They'll be saying, bring in more government agents and all the rest of it. People turn to that when you're dealing with something like airlines, it's and lives and the safety and security, people will turn to government.
Yeah, you do not outsource national security, and this is essentially national security.
No, but we're not. The police officers and the FBI will have the operational control over no-fly lists, no watch lists. The security agents are looking
more
at
police
bags,
and FBI.
right?
Yeah.
Well, no, I'm with that. I would agree with you. I mean, I think you could put, but look, the risk is increasing, and now we see Charles de Gaulle. The great concern about this Egypt Air flight, we don't know exactly at the moment, is Daesh staying quiet, Al-Qaeda staying quiet. What if there are more plots in the pipeline? That's the great concern in Europe.
Well, you prepare for the worst, but you don't necessarily tweet it out as fact, not mentioning any names.
But the issue with the long lines is really, the bag checks is what it is, and the X-ray machines that we go through. That whole procedure needs to be bolstered and sped up.
The sad thing is, at some point, people are going to be able to get through.
But you know, what a success in a way, a horrible success 9/11 was, in terms of what it's done to this country, not simply bringing down those buildings and killing all those people, but the enormous cost imposed on America from all of this airlines waiting, all the rest of it.
Right.
Amazing.
And,
That's right.
Yeah. Although the people who lost their lives on that Egypt Air flight would be happy to stand in line for hours if it meant they were going to be safe. So I think we have to put this in perspective.
There are baggage fees.
Oh,
and the $25 and $35 baggage fees.
You sound like you've been there recently,
waived.
John.
You know why they should be waived? Because they encourage passengers to take luggage through security, creating delays. Congress should take action to ban the fees.
Well, that might
Do
be,
you
might be a
agree
bad
with
idea.
that?
Yeah, I like the idea because we do find people bringing more and more bags in, including me.
Issue 2, Obama's overtime. In what Barack Obama calls a minimum wage increase for the middle class, new federal rules on overtime pay were introduced this week. Overtime is defined as work beyond 40 hours a week. The changes mean that employers have to pay time-and-a-half wages to 4.2 million workers who make less than $47,476 a year. And note this, according to the Department of Labor, 56% of those eligible for new overtime pay are women. 53% of those eligible have at least a 4-year college degree. And 1.5 million are parents with children under 18. But while liberals are celebrating the news, others are less happy. Speaking to USA Today, Trey Kovacs of the Competitive Enterprise Institute argued the rule would impose a, quote, huge cost and regulatory burden on employers who face pressure to cut back on benefits and full-time employees, unquote. Question, will this policy raise salaries or will it cap salaries? Tom Rogan.
Like Obamacare, it will cap salaries. I mean, it's just unbelievably stupid. I mean, if you look at what's happening already with Obamacare, with people cutting wages, with people putting people on lower hours so that they can avoid the mandates, that's what's going to happen here. It sounds great on paper. It sells well with MoveOn.org, but it is going to be very bad for businesses. And the proof will come in 2 years when we see what happens between Texas and California.
It's going to affect over 12 million people. It turns out that businesses have been classifying people as managers when they don't manage anybody, and when you have managers earning less than the people that work for them, something has gone awry. So they're blowing the whistle on this practice. There's going to be pushback from business. There always is, but this is the right thing to do. It's an attempt to raise wages that employers have kept their foot on to keep down.
Well, look, the idea that a bunch of politicians, most of whom have never created a job in their entire life, can determine exactly how business should be managed by millions and millions of businesses who work every day. What's going to happen is somebody's going to get a pay raise here, other employees are going to be dropped off, some shops are going to say, let's get out of the U.S. and all these regulations and move to Mexico. It's going to be all worked around by these millions and millions of people in Congress, where they'll say, look at what a wonderful thing we did, and it's the same old nonsense. It's why the country's in economic trouble.
But this is also why there's so much support going to your protege, Donald Trump, because people out there, working people, are upset over the growing wage and pay gap. And this is one way of addressing it. It's not perfect. perfect, but those folks who say Washington isn't aware of what ordinary people are going through
how
out
can
there.
Washington decide exactly the terms by which a company sitting there with his
It's a
books
last
working all
resort,
these
Pat.
employees
It's a
around?
last resort, Pat.
But
You know,
you give a
people
flat-out
have not,
mandate to
working
all
people
these
haven't
companies.
had an increase in 30 years
Well,
in
why
their
don't we
in
raise
income in
everybody's
real
pay to
dollars.
50,000 and get it over with?
Well,
Right.
what they've done is they've labeled everybody a manager so they don't have to pay overtime.
Well,
That's not fair.
Right.
But why are they doing
So
that?
you
Because
have-
they can't afford it.
What's fair?
Well, they say
the
they can't
hacks
afford
up
it.
on the hill.
The fact is, the workers can't afford it either.
Regulations are designed
Well, how
to
about
protect the
employees
people.
working with the employer and the boss and quitting and moving to another job and striking and all these things that people work out their problems themselves
If
without
you've
the
got
help of
negotiating power.
Okay.
without the help of those clowns up
Well-
on the hill.
Well, folks with a high school
I-
degree or less don't have the negotiating
can't put
power,
an office-
and that's why they're getting
Ayn Rand
screwed.
is not president. Barack Obama
I know, but-
is.
yeah,
and
but
this is
the
something
community
that fits
organizer,
this-
how many jobs did he create?
He's Mr.
How many
Mandate.
jobs
and that's
did you
the-
create,
this is the-
Pat?
this
I
is-
worked for
that gonna
Reagan.
be
He
the
created
definition?
20 million.
But more jobs created under his administration than were there
Right,
when he
but
came in.
it is this one of the slowest economic recoveries
Oh,
we've ever
yeah.
had. Well, it is.
That's
I mean,
what, that's what the critics say.
that's
when
what
they
the
got to find something to
statistics say, Pat.
criticize.
You've never-
At least it's a recovery.
what-
That's better than zero.
Well,
and
but
it's better than letting the
zero.
country go
It's
bankrupt.
better than zero, but Tom's right. It hasn't.
Right.
1 year has it gone at 3%.
And we're
1984.
better than every other industrial country, aren't we?
1984, Reagan hit 6%.
What country's
It's a-
doing
it's
better?
It's a
And-
worldwide
right?
slowdown, and
yeah.
actually, this country is in very
And
good
the
shape.
problem,
compared
what do we need to do to
most
grow
other
the
places.
economy? We should all
America's
agree.
great, you
we
could
need
say.
we need productivity, and our productivity is in the toilet. And that makes
No,
it. That's why we
American-
can't increase wages. Is because employers don't have the economic gain to
no,
pay for it.
American workers are the most productive in the world.
But our
And
trending is down.
And the employers aren't appropriately rewarding them for that productivity.
Well, if they're
That's
most
what's going
productive,
on.
why did we lose 6 million manufacturing jobs in the first 10 years of this decade?
Because we don't want to do those kinds of menial
Manufacture?
labor.
They're
and we're-
manufacturing jobs, the best jobs working
No,
people
the-
have.
the-
Gone.
Well, let's impose the big tariffs that you want to impose, and then we'll keep all of our commerce here. But that's not going to increase overall productivity
Well,
either.
listen, under McKinley, when we had a huge tariff, growth was 7% a year. It was
Let's bring back
7%
those
a year in the
McKinley years.
20s.
That's right.
It was 6% a year under Reagan. It's just that I think Barack Obama, as a
na-
community organizer, he
nature-
should have gone to business
The
school.
the nature of work is changing, and you're not going to bring back those assembly line jobs. And
Donald
so,
will.
yeah, well, we'll see. I don't believe
Exit
that for a minute.
question. President Obama's overtime rules be an overall boost to the economy or an overall drag on the economy? Pat Buchanan.
It's just one more pile-on regulation, which will slow things down.
It's a boost to the people who need it, and if it's a T9C drag on employers, that's what it would build. T9C, it's a pretty minor move.
That which Pat hath said.
I think wages have been depressed for so long that we're not going to notice the difference.
Really?
As far as overall productivity goes, that's what you find when wages have been suppressed for a long time. It takes a while to catch up, and this move will be modest.
Why have they been
as far as having an
suppressed if
impact.
President Obama has been in power for 8 years?
President Obama has increased employment during his years.
But you're just
we are more productive than
complaining
when we
about
came
no
in.
pay
You
raises.
said 10 years. He hadn't been in office for 10 years.
Right.
You know?
And there is that Republican Congress
and during
there
his 8 years, things have worked out
that
well.
doesn't do anything.
Sounds like a perfect crime. They will be a drag on the economy. Issue 3, Bernie versus the party.
Well, it worries me a great deal. I don't want to go back to the '68 convention because I worry about what it does to the electorate as a whole, and he should too.
Democrats are roiling in a sea of political turmoil. Senator Bernie Sanders is continuing to generate excitement and strong showings in the ongoing Democratic primary race and refused to drop out and endorse Hillary Clinton. And many senior Democrats fear that the longer Senator Sanders stays in the race, the more money Hillary Clinton will have to spend defeating him. The party officials want to unify around Hillary Clinton and refocus their fire on someone else, namely presumptive Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump. Still, the tensions are only increasing, while Mr. Sanders' supporters have been accused of threatening Democratic Party officials. Mr. Sanders says his party is disrespecting its liberal base. Question: what happened between Clinton supporters and Sanders supporters at the Nevada Democratic Convention? Eleanor, you want to speak to that?
When they were awarding the delegates, the Sanders people felt that they were unfair in the proportionality of how the delegates were awarded, and so I think a Sanders person threw a chair or something. Anyway, sort of a minimum of violence erupted. Look, I think that Bernie Sanders has every right to stay in the campaign until the end. He could even win California. Hillary Clinton won California in 2008. She was winning primaries at the end. She had a stronger case against Barack Obama in 2008 than Sanders has against Clinton in terms of she has won 3 million more votes than he has. She's won many more primaries, big state primaries. And I think he's done wonderful things, energizing people, focusing the message. That's all good. But now he's kind of taken a turn where he's suggesting that if she gets the nomination, that's a rigged process. And if his voters believe that he has really been, screwed out of the nomination, it's going to be very hard to get them to back her. So he's got to begin making that turn. I think he will, but there's some tense times here.
But first off, it is a rigged thing with these super delegates or whatever they are, 500 of them immediately going into Hillary's basket. Secondly, John, Ms. Feinstein talked about the 68 convention. I was at the 68 Democratic convention, and it is not going to be like that,
Up in the
baby.
hotel room, right?
I was on the 19th floor of the Comrade Hilton. It's not going to be like that at all, but I will say this. Bernie, this is the last hurrah of Bernie Sanders. He's 74 years old. And more he has the aspect of a kamikaze pilot about him. He's going to take this thing all the way into this convention, right through that last ballot, and he wants to be an influence upon his party as the way, say, Senator Goldwater was, who lost the election in 1964 badly, but really influenced the future. And I can't blame the guy. He's been fighting for these beliefs his whole life. He's now got an enormous following. He's got every right to go to the convention and speak at the convention. And I think he's going to say it was a rigged process. I think he'll endorse Hillary. But it was a rigged process,
Well,
Eleanor.
the thing is about the rigged process was designed.
She didn't rig the process.
Right.
I mean, she was a victim of these rules 4 years ago. So he leaves some 8 years ago. He leaves some mistaken impressions.
And it was an uphill climb for Obama 8 years ago because of these rules. Hillary had all the superdelegates initially, and he had to earn the gains that he made and the nomination. Bernie faced the same challenge. I think you're right, Pat. I think he's not going to get the nomination, obviously, and he wants the leverage to have as much of an impact as he can on the platform. The whole question is, though, can the party pull together afterwards? The party that's the least unified is the party that loses.
And the difficulty we have here is that the anger on the part of those Sanders supporters is very real, and they do feel that they are being steamrolled over. But the establishment and the connectivity between the perception of Hillary Clinton as a kleptocrat, someone who does the Wall Street speeches, versus Bernie as the genuine guy is real. And I think I think it's going to be very hard for them to unify. And of course, Donald Trump is the person who benefits.
He has a legacy to worry about. He doesn't want to be seen as the guy who cost the party the presidency, number one. And number two, he wants to be seen as someone who changed the party rules. And they can give him that. Get rid of superdelegates, have open primaries.
The young people, the millennials now, are as agitated and angry as the outsiders and liberals were in the convention in Chicago. They're not as violent at all, I don't think, but they are as angry, and they do feel as shafted. Of course, then Bobby Kennedy had been shot, and Gene McCarthy was knocked out, and so was McGovern, and Humphrey was basically, who never won a primary, took the nomination. Yeah. They were bitter. You're going to have the same bitterness here.
That's a big difference between now 68. Difference. But that is what. Go ahead, John.
Well, I want to point out that the rift between the Clintonites and the
Sanderistas, right?
Sanderistas. Bernie Bros.
Is deep and worsening. Sanders says DNC chair, get a load of this, Debbie Wasserman, chairman of the DNC, unfairly backs Clinton.
Yeah, that's true.
Well,
in Colorado, just a moment. Colorado, just a moment. Sanders delegates are getting threatening calls from Clinton backers.
Yeah, they're behaving like Trump people. Shame on them. But the fact is that they have if Bernie will stand up there in the end, hold up Hillary's hand and say, no, we're unified, all this goes away.
Will it be like Teddy Kennedy up there at the 80 convention? He walked on the stage. I was up there, walked right on around and off.
That's right. We all saw
Carter
that.
following him. With Carter following him. Please,
but you know, President Carter wouldn't debate Ted Kennedy. That was a very different season, and Kennedy was far, far behind in delegates. He had no hope, and he was angry, and Carter was going to lose.
We're going to get one more debate.
One advantage Bernie has had is that there's no attack ads against him. The other Democrats don't want to attack Bernie, but they're attacking Hillary like crazy. And then we wonder, why is Hillary doing poorly in the numbers
in the polls? I can't believe it. One poll this week, Trump is 5 points ahead, Hillary.
Yeah, I can't believe I can't believe it either, Pat.
Well,
I can't believe it either, Pat.
The RCP average is still 3.5 Hillary.
The speed with which the Republicans have unified around him because they smell, hey, maybe he's not a big loser, maybe he'll win. I mean, that's what's going on here.
That brings a lot of people together.
We say loser now.
Loser.
we got to learn how to talk Trump.
Issue 4, Castros Conundrum. He's energetic, he's handsome, and he's touted as a possible vice presidential running mate for Hillary Clinton. No, it's not Pat Buchanan. It's Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, Julian Castro. But Mr. Castro has a battle on his hands. That's because some progressives believe he is too conservative, or perhaps too close to Wall Street, to join Mrs. Clinton's ticket. And an alliance of activists in New York, Philadelphia, Los Angeles, and San Francisco are calling on Mr. Castro to adapt his department policies for selling bad mortgages to Wall Street. This week, Mr. Castro showed he might just be listening. The secretary introduced new rules that will require lower principal costs for affected homeowners, a 5-year fix on interest rates, and a restriction to prevent firms from abandoning properties. Still, not everyone is happy. Some say Mr. Castro's actions will discourage investment in impoverished neighborhoods. Question, is Castro making policy with a view to seducing Hillary Clinton? You want to speak to that, Alana?
Well, these are policies he inherited from his predecessor. He hasn't even been at HUD, he's been there maybe a year and a half, 2 years, and he's been working to change these policies ever since he got there. So I don't think this is done with an eye to seducing Hillary Clinton, but I think he clearly would like to be on the ticket, and he's apparently on the short list. I mean, he former, mayor of San Antonio, which is not a strong mayor position, and I think the main rap against him is that he's very young and doesn't have a whole lot of experience, but he's an appealing figure, and he's Hispanic, and the Hispanics are going to play a huge role in November, and so he would energize that constituency.
He would not even be considered for this as Secretary of HUD and the mayor of San Antonio were he not Hispanic. As we were talking in the green room, Barack Obama, there was the Hispanics are 16% of the population, but they're only 7% of the vote. And so if you can energize that Hispanic base, and maybe he can do it to some degree, it'd be enormously helpful in these swing states where Hispanics are growing in numbers. Virginia would be one, North Carolina would be another, Florida would be another, and not simply Cuban Hispanics. So that's his attraction, that's it. Yeah.
And I think we can tell how well he's doing by the very fact that people are trying to put out some dirt on him here, trying to link him with that seedy, unseemly side of the Washington Wall Street connection. It's a tenuous charge at best. But this is the beginning.
The challenge becomes
it's the same kind of charge the Bernie people are making against Hillary Clinton.
But
he's never worked on Wall Street.
The challenge, Clarence, though, I think, is that if you look at who is going to be buying, we need someone to buy these properties, and if not Wall Street, with the worry with these restrictions is that Wall Street or any other business won't buy them, and then they require the government payrolls controls it, right? And so then you have that decline and despair, the entrenchment of poverty.
So a lot of guys won't lend
It's a
for
hard
these
balance.
houses. They
But this-
won't lend
yeah,
for
right,
houses.
right,
if
exactly.
Too much
Are you
risk and
supporting
not enough
Castro's
reward.
policy or opposing it? I'm not sure.
Honestly, I think if you could, the key is that you have upward mobility. And so if Wall Street are just buying it and selling it off to the next, that's a problem. But if you can have a business interest balanced with the public interest, that's what you want. And you can't disincentivize it so much, though. There's not a profit incentive.
Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac can't hold these mortgages forever, and so he's now going to be selling them to Bank of America. If you're a purist, if you're a Bernie purist, you probably don't like it, but who else would he? Who would he sell them to?
Right.
I think it's an appropriate policy.
What about Hillary? Does she need a Latin American Veep?
Well, that's it. That's the only reason he's under consideration is he's a prominent, popular, attractive Hispanic. I don't think he's got
he's
presidential credentials, and
that
he's young,
helps
and he's the
millennials.
next generation.
Yeah, we call it identity politics, and obviously he comes under that category. She's got a lot of other picks, but she does need someone
The
to
answer
energize
is,
young people,
back in
and
Chicago,
he
we
might
call
be
it a
able.
balanced
He might be
ticket.
able to do it. Yes.
The answer is no. Trump has it locked in, and she doesn't need a Latin Veep unless he's Cuban American.
What is Trump got
Cuban
locked in?
American would not help her as much as a
No,
Mexican American.
Cubans and Hispanics are generally,
Well, and
or
Cubans
Mexican
aren't that
Americans are
numerous.
not necessarily allies.
But you're right that Trump is her
True.
biggest
Trump,
ally.
Trump hasn't.
Think through it. I know you'll come around to my way of thinking. False prediction. Federal Reserve's interest rate hike next month will be the last this year. Pat, is this right or wrong? We've got one impression
I agree with
already.
the dog. I say no.
I agree with the dog, and I say yes.
They are not raising interest rates, but what a wonderful dog.
The dog sees her stock going
The
down.
answer is wrong. There will be another interest rate hike in November. We at the McLaughlin Group send our heartfelt condolences to the family and friends of CBS News legend Morley Safer, with a landmark reputation for exceptional investigative journalism and keen objective reporting. Say hi to Don Hewitt, Morley. Bye-bye.